What if Darth Nihilus trained Anakin Skywalker? Let's begin today's story a few months after Anakin joined the Jedi Order. He is 10 years old and has begun to learn the basics of the Force. His master is Obi-Wan Kenobi, a powerful and proficient Jedi. On one of Anakin's first missions as a young Jedi, he and Obi-Wan are deep in the Outer Rim on the planet Folkore, investigating a small rebellion. Anakin was only beginning to learn about democracy, and he watched Obi-Wan and his diplomatic skills with envy. One day, Anakin gets lost just outside of the main settlement, and he finds himself entering a cave where he senses a lot of Force energy. Anakin was young, and he was powerful and held the most midichlorians ever found in a life form. Pressing further into the cave, the Force gets stronger, calling him closer. He had never experienced anything like this before. He felt darkness, decay, and death, but it was intriguing. Anakin had always been an adventurer, and he couldn't help himself from pressing further inside the cave. When he reaches its lowest point, he finds an object atop a large pillar. As he marched closer, he began to hear voices all around him. They began as whispers until it formed into a normal voice. The voice welcomed Anakin, introducing himself as Darth Nihilus. Darth Nihilus has resided over Folkore for many years before his death. This planet held a direct link to him. When Anakin reaches the pillar, he recognizes the object as a holocron. Without even doing anything, the holocron opens, and Anakin's entire surroundings became engulfed in the dark side. He sees death and chaos, war and pillaging, starvation and cruelty. Nihilus speaks to the boy again, explaining that he is the ancient Dark Lord of the Sith, and it is customary that he kneels before him. Anakin didn't have a choice. The Force and dark side was taking over his body and his mind was being corrupted. His initial thought was to leave, but the dark side completely took over, rupturing his inner peace and changing the color of his eyes. Anakin had been forcefully turned to the dark side. Nihilus speaks to Anakin again and again, and tells him that he must resurrect him on the ancient planet of the Sith. Anakin recognized this as Coruscant from his teachings at the temple, but the Dark Lord corrected him. Anakin will travel to Peridea, home to the first planet of the Sith. That is where Nihilus will be brought back. Anakin follows the will of the holocron, leaving the cave and traveling to Sidious. It was here where Anakin found the ancient species named Purgle, who recognized his power in the Force as nothing less than extraordinary. Allowing Anakin's ship to remain in their mouth, they hit hyperspace where they traveled to Peridea. Intergalactic hyperspace travel was something that hadn't been done in thousands of years, and most of the known world didn't realize it was a possibility. They arrive at Peridea, where Anakin flies to the ancient world of the Sith that Nihilus spoke of. The holocron instructs him to go deep into the temple that his ancestors have created. From here, Anakin sat back and watched as the temple activated and then shot a beam of energy into the sky. He didn't understand what was happening, but before he knew it, the terrifying figure of Darth Nihilus appeared before him. In order to return to the living, Nihilus had to defeat the being that killed him over a millennia earlier. Mecha Surik appears in front of Nihilus as they begin to duel. Nihilus had spent the last 4,000 years dreaming of this moment, and he would not lose. He raises his hands and blasts her with lightning before slicing her head off. Nihilus had won. Nihilus praises his new student and his exemplary Force powers. He dubbed the young boy Darth Ramekin. Anakin thanked his new master. Young Skywalker wasn't in control anymore. The dark side presence had completely corrupted his soul and he couldn't do anything about it. Darth Nihilus would begin to train Anakin. The Sith Lord came from a different generation, thousands of years prior. Their ways of teaching were unique, cruel but exceptionally successful. Anakin would learn how to draw on his emotional fears, using the dark side to his aid. In his time, Nihilus had been dubbed the Destroyer of Worlds, and he instilled this into Anakin. He never praised him, always made sure Anakin knew he was weak. He held no power. For hours on end, Nihilus would force him to undergo Sith lightning treatment, which was his form of torture to mold the soul into a form of resilience and strength like none other. Nihilus didn't focus on the intricacies of the Force or different lightsaber techniques like the Jedi would. To him, none of that stuff mattered. All that mattered was how dark and dangerous your mind and soul became. The Chosen One was twisted and poisoned. He became so manipulated by the thoughts of the dark side that he started begging Nihilus to hurt him with lightning, that if he wasn't experiencing pain, then he was not a true Sith. Ironically, Anakin's powers would grow extremely quickly, and he became a very strong Sith Lord. Anakin would learn how to wield a lightsaber, but Nihilus's technique was that Anakin followed what the Force tells him, to swim without purpose and no technique, to use the dark side to defeat his enemies. After almost a decade of training Anakin in the Force, he believes that he is just about ready. Darth Nihilus' special ability in the Force is the power to devour entire planets by training its Force energy. He knows that the time has come to teach his apprentice this ability. He and Anakin leave the ancient Sith world so that the Dark Lord can properly give him a demonstration. They travel to the ancient Night Sister domain, where the ship resides in orbit. Standing on the bridge, Nihilus ensures that his apprentice is watching. Nihilus calls on the Force as it takes over the entire ship before being blasted onto the planet in front of them. Within seconds, Anakin sees the life of the planet drain, once a vibrant and nature-filled world turned to complete ash. This power was unparalleled, and Anakin needed it for himself. He asked his master the secrets, and Nihilus explained, draining the life of another being requires the strongest will, a will of shared darkness and pain. In order to do this, the user's soul must be turned into pieces, that there isn't any ounce of humanity left, only death. Darth Nihilus explains to his apprentice that for 10 years, he has been training him to forego his humanity, and to become the embodiment of the dark side. As they travel to the next planet, Nihilus brings test subjects before Anakin, each screaming in terror and horror at the two dark beings in front of them. Anakin reaches out with the Force as he attempts to drain their Force essence, and it worked beyond belief. Their life force is completely drained and goes straight back into Anakin, enhancing his powers and strength even more. From here, Anakin came straight to practicing on entire planets, draining their Force energy and completely destroying them. He was murdering billions of people at a time, but he didn't care. He was completely addicted to the power that he possessed. Now was the time to return back to their known galaxy and overthrow it, restoring the Sith as emperors once again. Back in the normal galaxy, Palpatine had continued with his standard plan without Anakin since his mysterious disappearance over a decade earlier. Obi-Wan had gone absolutely crazy when he lost Anakin. He was never the same afterwards, the Padawan's body was never recovered, and despite the Council's attempts at consoling Kenobi, the man felt lost. The Council were especially concerned about his disappearance, wondering if it had any ties to the Sith, perhaps the master of the Zabrak they had met on Naboo. No one could understand where the young Jedi had gone, and his body was never found. It was one of the largest mysteries in the Jedi Order. Currently, the Clone Wars are raging on, and millions of people are suffering and dying. Anakin and Nihilus returns, and Nihilus takes his apprentice to Malachor, the ancient world of the Sith. It was simple of Nihilus to travel there. Most of his life was spent on this planet, including his birthplace. As they arrive, they take control of an old Sith cruiser, like the one Nihilus used back in his prime. They observe the galaxy and the carnage going on within. It was comical. Normal beings thinking their actions have any impact on the galaxy at large. They were nothing compared to the Sith Lords. Anakin and Nihilus traveled to Kamino, where the clone army is being created at mass and reinforcing the front lines. Calling out with the Force, Nihilus and his apprentice work together to completely drain the planet of life, turning it from an enormous sea world with Kaminoans and cloning facilities to nothing but a floating ball of ash in outer space. This completely ruined the Republican chances in the war. The Jedi were horrified when they learned of Kamino's destruction, and no one could pinpoint the culprit. Even Palpatine was absolutely furious, as it meant that his entire plan was disrupted. He needed the clones in order to destroy the Jedi. Theories were thrown around about what destroyed the planet, but at this point in the galaxy, there was nothing known to ever destroy an entire planet. With the destruction of Kamino, the Jedi Order called all of their troops and generals back. Now they're spread too thin with no reinforcements, and they have to take evasive action. They regroup on Coruscant and a few neighboring planets, where they mount defenses against the Separatists, knowing that they will invade any day now. People of the Republic began to sign up for the army to help with numbers, but this would only delay the inevitable. Anakin and Nihilus travel to Ryloth, where a giant fleet of separatists are after conquering the planet from the Republic. The two Sith Lords chuckle as they approach, using the Force to destroy a squad of droids. They are searching for Dooku, who they have learned is in control of the separatists and is the Dark Lord of the Sith. Nihilus knew that the Sith had grown so much weaker over the centuries. Dooku was merely pretending. When they found him, Nihilus' suspicions were confirmed. If he were born in his era, he would have been completely destroyed by even the weakest Sith. They each ignite their lightsabers and fight, but this fight would not last long. After mere seconds, Nihilus demonstrates the power he holds and Anakin simply watches in awe as Nihilus decapitates the Count. The power these two Sith Lords held was exponential, no one could defeat them. Speaking to Wat Tambor, they learn that the Separatist is governed by a council of leaders. With Tambor's communications device, they contact the Separatist Council and say that they are the rulers of the Separatists now. They have no choice but to accept this or die. When Sandhill tries to refuse, Nihilus uses the Force to choke him across planets, a power that is so strong that there is no counter. He eventually releases him, but this power has been demonstrated. They sit atop their thrones, powerful beings. But their quest wasn't done yet, they still need to conquer the Republic. Days later, Sidious would contact Sandhill and instruct him to send more droids towards Coruscant. But Sand would tell the Dark Lord that they don't respond to him anymore, their new ruler is more powerful. Sidious would chuckle, in his mind, there wasn't a being more powerful than him. Little did he know, Nihilus had the face of death and was his worst nightmare. Sidious would leave Coruscant and go to Moonless to speak with San about this, believing that this was some joke and he wouldn't participate. However, he didn't realize the danger he was embarking upon. Sidious was about to fight someone, but in his eyes, he knew that it was impossible for there to be another Force user with his level of power. He expected this to be similar to the Maul and Savage situation, where the beings are powerful but no match for him. Sidious arrives on Moonless where he finds Anakin and Nihilus. He didn't recognize either of them. However, when the Sith Lord introduces himself as Darth Nihilus, Sidious freezes. He has heard the stories. Palpatine replies that it's impossible. He has been dead for thousands of years. Nihilus explains the story of how Anakin found him, and then everything clicked in Palpatine's mind. He reveals that this was the long-lost Chosen One, the one that disappeared 10 years ago. He had resurrected one of the most powerful Sith Lords of all time. Sidious was absolutely horrified. He didn't know what to do, but he couldn't escape the situation. He had to fight. The three Sith Lords engage in a duel. Sidious had never dueled someone with such unique tactics, and it was clear that his fighting style was not modern. Anakin and Nihilus were fighting with the abilities of the Sith of old, the most powerful order in history. Sidious stood no chance, and within moments, Anakin was able to tear through his defenses and stab the Dark Lord, killing him. Now, there were only two Sith in the galaxy, and they had complete control over the entire Separatist army. This was too easy for them. They would celebrate their victory, but it was expected. No one stood a chance against them. All that was left was invading Coruscant. As they begin to plan their invasion, placing all their troops in the same position, Anakin asks his master why they can't just devour the planet and take it with the Force. Nihilus knew this was possible, but it was the easy way. There was no honor in winning a galactic battle like that. Instead, he would rather put his abilities to the test and see who is more powerful. The following day, they set off and all of their ships entered the system, attacking the Republic fleet. This was a massive fight, with dozens of cruisers fighting each other. The Separatists were able to get many ships through the blockade and onto the surface of Coruscant, creating absolute devastation. The Jedi Order scrambles to assemble their defenses. They have millions of clones on the planet at this point, allowing for much protection. The grounds of Coruscant were in absolute peril, citizens were locked in their homes. The two Dark Lords of the Sith reached the ground and Anakin began slaughtering the clones and Jedi alike. Their goal was the Jedi Temple though. Nihilus separates from Anakin, who is encountered by a large group of Jedi, determined to end the Crimson lightsaber user. But Anakin places his saber onto his belt and reaches out with the Force, draining all of their energy instantly as he kills them. Anakin saw familiar faces, but it didn't matter. They died within seconds of seeing him. From across the battlefield, he could see his master moving like a blur and killing anyone in sight. As they reached the Jedi Temple, the Republic blockade had completely broke and the entire Separatist forces reached the surface. Millions of droids accompanied the Sith Lords as they entered the temple, showing no mercy for any lives. Nihilus single-handedly killed Windu and Yoda, who posed no threat to him. The Sith of old were a different breed, and used their dark side powers in ways never seen before. Anakin encounters his old master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi instantly recognized his old apprentice. Asking for answers, he wanted to know what had happened to his apprentice. How did he fall so far to the dark side? But Anakin had no desire to speak, simply engaging in a lightsaber duel that would end within seconds, as the Dark Lord slowly decapitates Kenobi. The Order would not last. They had zero counter to the everlasting forces of the Separatists. It was a complete massacre, and the entirety of Coruscant fell that day. There were no survivors. Nihilus and Anakin introduced themselves to the galaxy as Dark Lords of the Sith. They became the most ferocious dictators in history, eating and devouring worlds at will and just for the fun of it. Their base of operations was Coruscant, as they began to rebuild the Sith Order. Nihilus was the master, but it didn't mean Anakin wasn't any less his equal. They worked together to create a galaxy where the Sith and dark side would thrive, leaving little room for the light side of the Force. The Jedi Order would never recover. After 1,000 years of dominant rule from the Jedi, the Sith have finally taken their power back, and they would work hard to ensure that they never lose it again. Nihilus was the perfect teacher for Anakin to realize his dark side powers. He learned how to harness all of his midi-chlorians and reach his full potential in the Force. He became one of the most ruthless Sith Lords of all time, his name forever etched in history. No one would ever have freedom again. These were the most tyrannical and powerful beings of all time. If you enjoyed today's video, you must watch What If Anakin Started His Own Jedi Order and What If Mace Windu Trained Anakin. Please check out our membership page if you would like to support the channel. It really helps us out. Thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with you.